All right, good to see you guys. Last night I hit the guys. I thought, number one, I was proud as hell of them. And they know from this point moving forward that the herd gets thinner and the strong get to move along. And that was something that we had discussed. And this defense is really ready to fight. And over the last 3 weeks, they've really pushed themselves hard, to sharpen the axe and find the ways we want to improve. And you've heard me talk about that, from our tackling, our running, the ball hawking. And so they know there's not a switch to flip on. That playoffs are here, like it's already on, and we're ready to go get it on. So that's where I'm at, but just want to share that with you guys as we get rocking. So with that, Dave, want to get us started?
Yeah, Dan, David Moore, Dallas Morning News. Just follow up on that. You always talk about your tackling and how essential it is, and you had a few games along the way where that wasn't there. I hate to say it's expected, but with the size of your defense and just the length of the season, are you going to have those games and it's just about being sure you don't have them late? Or?
You don't want to, because you want to make sure every time that you get it on, you go. And so that game, talking about Buffalo just from a few weeks ago, really was one of the catalysts to make sure, like, can we push ourselves hard to find all the things that we want to improve upon. And although we didn't win all of those games after that one, those last three, there were markers that I wanted to see, and the speed and the hitting and the tackling. And so to see some of that take place, I thought that was really what we would need, heading into the postseason, because you face a lot of different styles of offense. You need it, and you just have to make sure, man, you're hitting all the marks. And so the guys push themselves hard in that space to sharpen ourselves up. And so that's why I'm excited heading into this week that they're really ready to fight.
And understanding you're not potentially real deep into looking at the tape of Green Bay, but just your impressions of Love, what you've seen from him, how he's developed in his first season, and if you've had the tape, just what he was early and what he is now.
Yeah, I think as I've started some, you can see where the season started to where he is now. And don't quote me exactly, I don't know if they're 2-5 and they became 7-3, something, that there's a big difference. And what really jumped out to me is how impressive he is throwing a deep ball. And great touch to do that. They've been a good play action team, from Matt, from the time he's been there, and that has been carried on. And you can see the number of yards per catch for a lot of these receivers and tight ends. There's a lot of deep balls, a lot of explosive plays, and so that has been one thing I was very impressed by, is his ability to take the shots and hit the deep ball. That's where these explosive plays can live.
Dan Tarish with ESPN. With Stefan's situation and the shoulder, how important is he to what you guys do?
And he's really important. And as you're going through the week, you want to make sure this is not like your finger that got dislocated and okay, I'm good. So he's got to get the strength and the functionality to move and do that. And so we'll take it all the way through the week. But I would say about him, if there is a way, if there is a chance, he will find it. He's been that type of competitor his whole life, and there's no difference in that now. So just got to see, the strength of it to tackle and do all the things to do. But we were encouraged by the first step, and so now you just keep stacking them along the way. But it was good to get some good news this morning and not go the other way.
When he went down, were you up
breathing
there
in a paper bag? No. And because you do have to plan for these contingencies, and it sucks when a guy goes down. And but we also know that that is part of doing business. And so we acknowledge, the injury for him, and certainly last night was saying, come on, we can do this, and, putting out good thoughts for him. But you do have to be prepared when those moments come at any position. And so that's why in practice, you see a lot of different guys playing different spots, just so for when those moments come that you're ready for them.
Louis Scruggs, NBC5. I know it was 2 years ago when you played them. How different is their running game? Was it still kind of the same way it was when you faced them up here in Lambeau?
Yeah, they are. They've been a heck of a running team, and what I've seen over the last few weeks, it's that combination of the runs and play passes that go together. That's, to me, when offenses are at their best, when they're able to make a run look like a play pass, and want the running linebackers and safeties to step up, and you rip one behind them, or if they're playing off, and you get to run it. So I think at the front of it, you see these two good backs, and they got a good line, they can move, but the ability for them to get the ball out on the perimeter, that's been impressive to me. But as far as different styles, no, because I think they stay pretty consistent with the system. So we'll have to do a really good job in our tackling, our edge setting for sure.
What do you view this as for your yourself and your team? This is your third crack at it here in the playoffs.
Well, I think each moment or each year, I guess, it's its own unique opportunity. And so for me, certainly part of my reason of wanting to be back here was to, get a chance to coach these guys and go for it. And that's why over the last, month or so, we've really been pushing each other hard to make sure that all of our stuff gets aligned like we want. Because when you get in here, there's only 14 teams in a tournament. And then, as you said, the strong get to move along. And so you want to make sure you're at your strongest, you're at your best. But I try to not look too far down. There's just this game. And it just honestly goes better that way than if we get 3 games from now, like, man, we just got to play this weekend and fight our asses off. And if we do that, it gives us our very best chance to play like we want to play.
Dan, Micah got his 14th sack and Duran got a pick. Those plays, obviously it was a blowout, so I guess they weren't as consequential, but how important is it for those players, those younger players, to have those kind of milestone moments, especially going into the playoffs and things?
Yeah, I think, and both of them are a little bit different. And, we've been super proud of Duran to have, a historical season in terms of touchdowns. There's a reason that they don't happen very often. But by the same token, you don't want to ever, take it for granted, and the work that those guys put in to get there. And, we'll count on that moving forward. But I think it does have confidence knowing that you can carry that forward about how we play. And like I said, there's not something, okay, now that the playoffs are here, we're going to change like that. That switch is already on. And we've been in that mode and that mindset and that aggressiveness. So I would anticipate that to continue. Now, the games are tighter, they're stronger, and as you get to here, everybody's down to fight to the last second in the playoffs. And so those guys who can make those unique plays, they'll have their opportunities to do that.
Garrett Podell, CBS Sports. With Jordan Love, he seems to almost fade, not like out, but backwards in the pocket and then lean off his back foot, but still fire pretty hard deep ball. How unique of a ability is it to kind of fade away and still have that same kind of arm strength? And what is the challenge of defending that?
It is. It's tough, especially on blitzes, where somebody can backpedal and still rip the ball down the field. I think one of my first memories of that in the coaching side was Donovan McNabb, where he could just get back, and you guys covered, well, maybe not you, but a number of you have covered Donovan McNabb through your careers, and he had such a unique way on some pressures to be able to move back from the pocket and still rip the ball down the field. So I think more than anything, it speaks to the arm strength. Where anybody who can, move out of the pocket, not have to step up and hitch and throw, that has a special trait, and he definitely has it. That's why I think you see so much success for them on these deep balls. He's got great accuracy, and if you're a guy who can, continually hit deep balls and have accuracy with that, you can change the field position and you become a dangerous person.
Quick follow-up. You had, I think, Matt LaFleur on your staff in Atlanta. What's
That's
it like going up against him, play caller to play caller, and your relationship?
Yeah, well, one, the guy's a hell of a coach, and I think that goes without saying just with the job that he's done there. And, to see him now transition, with the same offense with a, new signal caller, I think it speaks to his coaching, his teaching to go from – there was going to be bumps in the road with new players, but when you go through those early, and you've heard me say that before, when you get to this time of year, they've got some of the scars because they made a mistake or didn't quite nail it. And sometimes, not just as a quarterback, but you have to go through the lessons. And even though you may have backed up one of the best that's ever done it, you still have to be in the fight. And I think as a quarterback, you could probably relate to that. It's not just in the meeting room. Like, you have to be in it and see it and go for it. And so I thought he's done a tremendous job.
Nick Harris, DallasCowboys.com. I know a big emphasis coming out of those losses to Buffalo and Miami was getting back to taking the ball away and stopping the run. You guys have been able to do that the last 2 weeks. Do you feel like this defense is hitting the stride at the right moment?
I think we're making that progress, and we talked about sharpening the axe and those things, and if our running and our hitting were right, I thought the ball would come. And although it didn't against Miami, I thought we still had our chances there to do that. And so we did against Detroit, we did again yesterday, and so I've been so impressed by Jordan over the last few weeks. He made another play yesterday, and Donovan too. To see those guys really put the work in and find their space to do that, that's a big deal. But we'll get tested again. And that's why going into the postseason, you want to have all your shit together, and knowing that not every team is the same, and so you want to be ready to get it on however they play.
Scott Dixon with the AP. This question is obviously about Mike facing the Packers, but I wonder what kind of bond forms between a head coach and a franchise and a city when you go to a Super Bowl, make a deep run like that, regardless of how things might end a year or two or three or whatever later?
Yeah, and I think that'd be a good one for him, but I think anybody knows you put so much into it that you feel connected to the team and the organization, and so there's a lot that goes into that, and he's done a lot of great work there, and the history has shown that. So, but at the end of it, you're able to compartmentalize. That was a different time and place, and you go back and reflect at another time. But at this time, you're just thinking about, how do you go win and play your best.
Right. Dan, generally speaking, how would you describe the difference between regular season football and playoff football as you view it?
I would say certainly mistakes are more expensive because the margin of victory is closer. And so you want to make sure that you're playing aggressive and attacking, but to make sure, because these margins are going to be so close, that you're really able to execute. And that's kind of, Brad, what sharpening the axe has been about, to really, even when you're ahead, to really stay accustomed to executing at the highest level. And I was proud of the guys for that last night. Sometimes you can get ahead, you start, okay, I'll rush here, I'll do this, but they stayed consistently on it, Brad. And so I think people talk about the speed being different, and I think there's probably some of that, but at the end of it, man, I think it's going to come down to the execution, because most of the games are so tight and they come down to it. So you better really be on point with your stuff, and that's why at this time of year you don't make things up. You do what you do at a really, really good level.
Dave?
Dave Laufenberg, Cowboys Radio Network. So Dan, I mean, obviously your profession is a grind, and it starts training camp and no let up for the season, but do you, as a coach, have a bounce in your step now this week, when bouncing out of bed maybe a little easier or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think, and that probably began earlier for me. I did it in Miami, and I did for Detroit, and I certainly did this week. I wish we could have gone a day early. You had that feeling and that spring in your step, and so when you get to this space, it is that, and you feel a little lighter and a little more ready to go. But by the same token, you just stay in the moment of that day and this part of the game plan to go with it. And if you stick to that process, babe, I think that's the way. And because the same process you get to repeat the next week, and the better you play, the more you get to move on. So I try to stay especially consistent with that process.
John?
Dan, Jonah Javai with WFAA. Hate to stir up bad memories. I'm pretty sure that Cowboys-Packers game that was played here, I think it was 2017, the same year you guys went to the Super Bowl. Do you remember anything about that game specifically, watching it, maybe doing any prep or homework on that game, or any takeaways from that, considering it was such a thriller?
I just remember, honestly, Dallas was an excellent team too, and Green Bay was, so we had played on a Saturday. So it was just going to determine that game, were we going to play the NFC Championship in Atlanta, or would we be on the road? And so you guys know the importance of playing at home and what that means. So, but that's kind of the experience that I remember for it.
Dan, you mentioned Jordan Lewis and Donovan Wilson kind of hitting their strides at the same time. Is that just coincidental that they both kind of hitting their stride at the right time, or is there something,
Well, that's a good question. I can't say that there is about why they both would. I would say this, sometimes the longer it goes, you just see, like, eventually the dog competitor is going to come out and you find it. And so those two are built to fight, and they are just that way. And so at some point, it's going to go their way. It's going to be ready for them just because of their tenacity and their, like, willingness to just out. And maybe it happened on other games, maybe it didn't, but to see that tackling and the finishing going on, like, that is how they're built. And sometimes it shows up stronger than others, but the play that Jordan made to, get a fumble out and recover at the same time was just remarkable. But it really is who he is, in terms of fighting and going for it and doing the extra. And so I just didn't think he would be denied. And there's been markers like that through the season, but it also has been very cool to see it with Donovan too.
We'll go with Jacob, Todd, and finish with Newey.
Dan, where do you see Damone Clark, where he's at right now, especially considering how he's had more on his plate since Leighton's injury? Where's his development at?
Well, the one thing I really, really feel from him, and you guys probably too, is the speed. And you've probably seen it on outside plays and toss plays. There's been some short yardage stops, outside runs, and that to me is when he's at his best. And we try to cover him up inside, and we allow him to get sideline to sideline. But he's just gotten stronger, and he's kind of a microcosm of that whole group where there's ups and downs, but you just keep pushing and you find your way. And so he's now playing his best, at this time of year, and he had to go through, much like we talked about Jordan Love having some mistakes early on, and you learn from them and you grow. I think that probably applies to Clark in this space, to say he's a perfectionist, but has also learned, I got to go cut it loose and let it rip, and he's certainly done that. So with him and Bell, I'm certainly pleased to see, the direction of how they're heading.
David Nuttall, you went into this season with forced turnovers for 2 straight years, something Pittsburgh hadn't done since the 70s. And while you didn't lead the league this year in that category, do you still feel this, or how do you feel in what areas this defense has taken steps from even where it was at the end of last season?
Well, I think, number one, I felt a stronger connection right from the very beginning, and their ability to push one another and to go for it. And so then having to, fight through some adversity early. That was Overshown, that was Diggs, that was Van Der Esch, 3 players that were going to have significant, snaps and roles here. And to see those roles change and evolve, that's the sign of a connected group, because they just weren't going to back off to say, hell, we can't do it now, they're out. And I really respect that, because they weren't going to just say, oh, well. It was just the opposite, to say, how do we go and fight for it together? And there's been examples of, safeties coming down to play linebacker and, doing that job with J.K. and Bell and others filling that role. But the one thing I really admire about them is their ability to go get it on and fight. And knowing that tough, parts are going to come, but you stay and you hang together, and that's really when the cool stuff's there. And so this is a tough group. They've been through the fights, and although we were very uncomfortable with how we played at Buffalo a month ago, the good that came out of that, I would say, was seeing us recapturing who we are and how we get it on, and knowing that it was going to be weeks of this, and I really admired that.
Your former OC, Kyle Shanahan, said that if he was an owner, Raheem Morris would be his first choice as a head coach. Can you speak to, and the Commanders want to talk to him, can you speak to who he is as a coach and what you think he can do with another opportunity in this?
Yep, I couldn't agree with him more, and I've known Raheem for more than half my adult life, and so he is a remarkable person. He's a fantastic coach and teacher, but he is one of the very best connectors. And if you were wanting somebody to connect a team and an organization, he'd be somebody that you'd want to call upon to do that. I'm certain he'll get his chance to do that, and I think he'll crush it. But he's got such a unique way about him. It's part of the reason he was working on defense in Atlanta. We made him the receiver coach, and not many people can cross that, to do that. And but I knew he was rare enough to do it, and then go back to defense eventually, knowing that would also be the case. So he is a very unique and exceptional coach. So I not only consider him a friend, but somebody that I'm super proud of too.
Thank you.
All right, see you guys.